Some cars were too fast, too bold, or just too ahead of their time, so they vanished. Whether they were banned, buried, or simply forgotten, these 12 American machines were erased from history. But why? Were they too dangerous? Too powerful? Or did they threaten the industry itself? Gearheads, get ready to uncover the forbidden legends that America tried to forget.
And emergency braking control.
The 1969 Chevrolet Serve 2 was a bold, almost revolutionary prototype that showcased just how far ahead of its time GM's engineers were when it came to developing a mid-engine Corvette. In an era when American cars were known for front-engine, rear-wheel drive muscle, the Serve 2 was something entirely different. A lightweight, mid-engine experimental vehicle that could have changed the Corvette's history decades before the C8. But despite its potential, GM ultimately buried the project, fearing it would alienate traditional Corvette buyers and disrupt the brand's carefully cultivated image. SERV stands for Chevrolet Engineering Research Vehicle, and the Serve 2 was the second in a series of experimental racing machines designed under the guidance of legendary GM engineer Zora Arkus Duntov. The car's design was heavily influenced by contemporary endurance racers, particularly those competing at Le Mans. Arkus Duntov envisioned the Serve 2 as a potential competitor for Ferrari and Ford's GT40, hoping to establish Chevrolet as a legitimate force in international motorsports. But GM had strict internal policies against factory-backed racing, and as a result, the Serve 2 was never given the opportunity to compete on the track. What made the Serve 2 truly special was its groundbreaking engineering. At its core was a mid-mounted 377 cubic inch small block V8 producing 500 horsepower, an impressive figure for the late 1960s. But what set it apart from anything else on the road was its drivetrain. Instead of the traditional rear-wheel drive layout found in production Corvettes, the Serve 2 utilized an advanced all-wheel drive system with separate transmissions and torque converters driving each axle. This setup gave the car unprecedented levels of traction and control, making it a serious contender for endurance racing dominance. On paper, the Serve 2 had everything it needed to take on the world's best. It was estimated to have a top speed of over 200 mph, a number that would have put it in direct competition with the dominant Le Mans racers of the era. Its lightweight construction, advanced aerodynamics, and cutting-edge drivetrain meant that it could have been Chevrolet's answer to the Ford GT40, the car that had just defeated Ferrari in the most famous endurance race in the world. But despite its obvious potential, GM's top executives were hesitant to give the green light to a car that strayed so far from the Corvette's traditional formula. One of the biggest reasons for the Serve 2's demise was GM's reluctance to push the Corvette too far into exotic car territory. The Corvette had built its reputation as an affordable, front-engine American sports car, and a mid-engine all-wheel drive racing machine would have been a radical departure. GM feared that such a car would not only be too expensive to produce as a road car, but also risk alienating its loyal customer base, who expected a certain kind of performance from their Corvettes. At the time, mid-engine cars were still a rarity, and GM executives were not convinced that American buyers were ready for such a dramatic change. Instead of taking the risk, GM decided to shelve the project, and the Serve 2 faded into obscurity. It was never given a chance to compete at Le Mans, and its technology was never implemented into a production Corvette. It remained an experimental one-off, a tantalizing glimpse at what could have been if GM had been willing to break the mold. It would take another 50 years before Chevrolet finally embraced the mid-engine Corvette concept with the introduction of the C8 in 2020, a car that in many ways owes its existence to the lessons learned from the Serve 2. Today, the Serve 2 is a fascinating piece of Corvette history, a reminder that GM had the technology and the vision to build a mid-engine, world-class sports car decades before it finally happened. It represents one of the great what-ifs in American automotive history. A car that could have put Chevrolet on the podium at Le Mans, changed the Corvette's evolution, and redefined what an American performance car could be. Instead, it was locked away, a victim of corporate hesitation and the conservative mindset of an era that wasn't quite ready for such radical innovation. The 1954 Dodge Fire Arrow 4 was the final and most refined version of a series of concept cars that could have put Chrysler at the forefront of the sports car revolution, years before America even had a true exotic machine. Designed by the famed Italian coach builder, Ghia, and powered by a powerful Hemi V8, the Fire Arrow 4 was a sleek, low-slung roadster that combined the best elements of American muscle and European styling. In many ways, it looked like a car that could have come from Ferrari, Maserati, or Aston Martin, yet it was all American at heart. But despite its jaw-dropping looks and impressive performance potential, Chrysler never gave it the green light for production, leaving it as just another forgotten dream car from the golden era of concept cars. The Fire Arrow series began in the early 1950s as an experiment in merging European design sensibilities with American power. Chrysler had a strong relationship with Ghia, who had already designed some stunning concept cars for the company, and the Fire Arrow was perhaps the most ambitious of them all. The goal was to create a high-performance luxury sports car that could take on the best from Europe while maintaining the brute force power and presence of an American machine. The first three Fire Arrow concepts were gradually refined, with each iteration bringing the design closer to something that could realistically be produced. By the time the Fire Arrow 4 debuted in 1954, it had reached its most polished and production-ready form. At its core, the Fire Arrow 4 was powered by Dodge's legendary 241 cubic inch Red Ram Hemi V8, producing a healthy 150 horsepower, a strong number for the early 50s, especially in such a lightweight car. The Fire Arrow's design was heavily influenced by the best European Grand Tours of the time, with flowing fenders, a long sculpted hood, and a low-profile stance that looked more like a Ferrari than a traditional American car. Ghia's touch gave the Fire Arrow an undeniable air of sophistication, and the car's clean lines and elegant proportions made it stand out even among other concept cars of the era. Performance-wise, the Fire Arrow 4 was built on a strong chassis with a fully functional drivetrain, meaning it wasn't just a showpiece, it could actually be driven. It featured a push-button automatic transmission, a feature that was rare for sports cars at the time, but was becoming a Chrysler trademark. The interior was just as striking as the exterior, with luxurious materials, a futuristic dashboard, and a driver-focused cockpit that hinted at its performance ambitions. Despite its stunning looks and real-world drivability, Chrysler ultimately decided against putting the Fire Arrow 4 into production. The main reason? They believed that the American market simply wasn't ready for an exotic, European-style sports car. In the early 1950s, most American buyers were still in love with big, comfortable cruisers, and the idea of a low-slung, two-seater performance car seemed too risky for a mass-market brand like Dodge. Chrysler had already seen how niche the market was for high-performance roadsters, with cars like the Nash Healey and the early Chevrolet Corvette struggling to find buyers. Instead of taking the gamble, they shelved the Fire Arrow project, and the sleek roadster never made it past the concept stage. The decision not to produce the Fire Arrow remains one of the great missed opportunities in Chrysler's history. Had it gone into production, it could have been America's first true exotic sports car, a competitor to the early Ferraris and Maseratis that were beginning to make waves in the European automotive world. It had the styling, the performance potential, and the prestige to be something truly special. Yet Chrysler's conservative approach to the market meant it was doomed to remain a show car. Today, the Fire Arrow 4 is a largely forgotten piece of automotive history, overshadowed by the more famous concept cars of its time. Unlike the Corvette, which eventually evolved into one of the greatest sports cars in the world, or the Ford Thunderbird, which became a luxury icon, the Fire Arrow 4 faded into obscurity. A few examples survive in private collections and museums, serving as a reminder of what could have been. A Chrysler-backed supercar with Italian styling and Hemi power, decades ahead of its time. The 1970 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 LT1 prototype was the muscle car that could have rewritten history. It was a one-off engineering exercise, created at a time when Chevrolet was experimenting with ways to push the Camaro beyond its competition, and for a brief moment, it seemed like it would be the ultimate performance version of the second-generation Camaro. This car wasn't just another high-performance variant, It was a street-legal, Trans Am-inspired monster that packed an all-aluminum 454 big block, making well over 500 horsepower. It had the potential to be one of the wildest muscle cars ever built. But like so many high-performance projects of the early 70s, it never made it past the prototype stage. The story of the Z28 LT1 prototype begins in the late 1960s when Chevrolet was riding high on the success of the first-generation Camaro. The Z28 had already established itself as a dominant force in the SCCA Trans Am series, and for 1970, the second-generation Camaro was completely redesigned with sleeker, more European-inspired styling, and a longer, lower stance that made it look more like a race car for the streets. Chevrolet knew they needed to keep the Z28 at the cutting edge of performance, and while the production model was already impressive with its solid lifter LT1 350 small block, the engineers had something much more radical in mind for a special prototype. At the heart of the Z28 LT1 prototype was an all-aluminum 454 cubic inch big block engine, a race-inspired powerhouse that was an evolution of the legendary ZL1 427. This wasn't just a bored-out version of an existing engine, it was a highly tuned, lightweight, big block built specifically for maximum performance. With over 500 horsepower on tap, it would have made the 1970 Z28 one of the fastest street cars ever produced, capable of embarrassing almost anything else on the road. The prototype was built with a heavy-duty 4-speed transmission, upgraded suspension, and a more aggressive aerodynamic package to handle the immense power. So why didn't this incredible Camaro ever see the light of day? The answer comes down to a combination of insurance costs, changing regulations, and Chevrolet's own internal restrictions. By 1970, muscle cars were already facing increasing scrutiny from insurance companies, which had started dramatically increasing premiums for high-horsepower performance cars. At the same time, federal emissions regulations were becoming stricter, and Chevrolet knew that keeping a high-compression, big-block monster like the 454 street legal would be an uphill battle. On top of that, GM had an internal corporate policy limiting mid-sized cars to a maximum displacement of 400 cubic inches, which had already forced the Camaro to stick with the 396 in previous years. While some cars, like the Copo Camaros and Yenko modified models, found ways around these restrictions, the idea of a factory-built Z28 with a 454 was ultimately too much of a stretch. After testing and evaluation, Chevrolet scrapped the project, and the 454-powered Z28 remained nothing more than a dream. Instead, the 1970 Z28 went into production with a 350 cubic inch LT1 small block, which was still an incredible engine but nowhere near as radical as the aluminum 454. While the production Z28 remained a respected performer, the cancellation of the prototype left enthusiasts wondering what could have been. Had it made it to production, it would have been one of the most fearsome muscle cars of all time, an aluminum big block powered beast that could have rivaled even the Hemi Mopars and big block Mustangs of the era. Today, the Z28 LT1 prototype is little more than a forgotten footnote in Camaro history. Few people even know it existed, and no known examples have survived. It remains one of the great what-ifs of the muscle car era, a glimpse at what Chevrolet was capable of before government regulations and rising insurance costs brought the horsepower wars to an end. If it had been produced, it could have been the most extreme Camaro of its time, a true race car for the streets that would have cemented the second-generation Z28 as a legendary performance machine. Instead, it vanished into history, leaving behind only speculation and the occasional whisper of what could have been. The 1971 Ford Torino King Cobra is one of the great lost legends of American motorsports, a car designed to dominate NASCAR but destined to remain a footnote in racing history. It was Ford's direct response to the Mopar winged warriors that had taken NASCAR by storm, a no-compromise aerodynamic machine with a striking wind-cheating nose, a massive 429 Super Cobra jet engine, and the raw speed to battle at the front of the pack. But just as the King Cobra was ready to hit the track, NASCAR changed the rules, banning extreme aero cars and effectively killing the project before it ever got a chance to compete. As a result, only a handful of prototypes were built, and the King Cobra was quietly buried, overshadowed by the Dodge Daytona and Plymouth Superbird, which had already cemented their place in racing history. To understand why Ford created the King Cobra, you have to go back to the late 1960s, when NASCAR racing was evolving from brute force muscle car battles into an all-out aerodynamic war. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona had rewritten the rules, proving that wind tunnel testing and slippery bodywork could mean the difference between winning and losing on the superspeedways. The Daytona was so effective that Plymouth followed up with the even more extreme Superbird in 1970. These Mopar aero cars were brutally fast, consistently hitting speeds over 200 mph on the long straights of Daytona and Talladega. They left Ford's standard Torino-Talladega struggling to keep up, and Ford's engineers knew they needed something radical to stay competitive. The answer was the Torino King Cobra. Unlike the relatively mild modifications Ford had made to the Torino-Talladega, the King Cobra was a completely reimagined car, with aerodynamics as the top priority. The most striking feature was its pointed front end, which had been developed through extensive wind tunnel testing. It was far more aggressive than the Talladega's nose, with a sharply sloped, wedge-like shape designed to cut through the air and maintain stability at ultra-high speeds. The grille was eliminated in favor of a smooth, integrated front fascia with hidden headlights, and the front bumper was seamlessly molded into the body to reduce drag. The hood was slightly raised in the center to accommodate the massive 429 Super Cobra jet engine underneath, while the rear of the car remained largely similar to the standard Torino, albeit with refinements for stability at high speeds. Under the hood, the King Cobra packed serious firepower. The 429 Super Cobra jet was one of Ford's most fearsome big block engines, officially rated at 375 horsepower, though real-world figures suggested it was making closer to 450. With a Holley 780 CFM carburetor, high-flow cylinder heads, and a solid lifter camshaft, this engine was built for high RPM power. It also featured an oil cooler, 4-bolt main bearings, and a heavy-duty crankshaft to handle the extreme stress of NASCAR racing. Power was sent to the rear wheels through a 4-speed top-loader manual transmission, while a Detroit locker rear differential ensured maximum traction. In race trim, with further tuning, the King Cobra could have easily exceeded 500 horsepower, making it a serious threat to the dominant Mopar wing cars. But before the King Cobra could ever prove itself on the track, NASCAR dropped a bombshell that changed everything. Concerned about the rising speeds of the aero cars, which were regularly exceeding 200 mph, NASCAR introduced new rules for the 1971 season that effectively banned these extreme designs. The most significant change was a restriction on engine displacement for any car with a radical aerodynamic package, limiting them to just 305 cubic inches, far smaller than the 426 Hemi or 429 Super Cobra jet that these cars were designed to use. This effectively neutered the aero cars and made them uncompetitive overnight. With its primary purpose gone, Ford had no reason to continue developing the King Cobra, and the project was scrapped before the car ever had a chance to race. Only a few prototypes were built before Ford abandoned the program. Some sources suggest that as few as 3 King Cobras were completed, while others claim there were up to 6. 2 of these cars still exist today, one painted bright yellow with a 429 Super Cobra jet, and another in red with a Boss 429 engine. These cars were quietly sold off, and the King Cobra faded into obscurity, never gaining the legendary status of the Daytona or Superbird, despite its groundbreaking design. Had it been allowed to compete, the King Cobra could have rewritten NASCAR history. With its advanced aerodynamics and massive big block power, it had the potential to challenge and possibly even surpass the dominance of the Mopar winged warriors. But instead, it became one of the greatest what-if cars in racing history. A project that was killed not by lack of performance, but by changing regulations and bad timing. The 1963 Pontiac Tempest Super Duty is one of the most intriguing and tragic stories in muscle car history. An experimental factory drag car that had the potential to dominate the competition, but was shut down before it ever had a chance to shine. It was a radical departure from traditional drag racing machines, combining advanced engineering with brute force to create a quarter-mile monster. Yet, thanks to General Motors' abrupt withdrawal from factory racing in 1963, Most of these cars were either scrapped or lost to history, leaving only a few surviving examples as reminders of what could have been. At first glance, the idea of a Pontiac Tempest being a drag racing powerhouse seems unlikely. The Tempest was originally designed as a compact economy car, known for its unusual rope drive system and rear-mounted transaxle. But Pontiac's engineers saw something different. A lightweight platform with near-perfect weight distribution that, when paired with a monster engine, could become an unstoppable force on the drag strip. And so, the 1963 Tempest Super Duty was born, a machine that combined advanced chassis design with one of the most powerful engines Pontiac had ever built. The heart of the Super Duty Tempest was the legendary 421 cubic inch V8, the same engine that had already proven itself in full-size Pontiac race cars. In factory tune, it produced a conservative 405 horsepower, though real-world figures were likely much higher. Equipped with dual 4-barrel carburetors, high-flow heads, and a racing camshaft, the 421 SD was a brutally powerful engine designed for one thing: winning. But what made the Tempest Super Duty truly special was its drivetrain. Unlike traditional front-engine, rear-wheel drive drag cars, the Tempest used a rear-mounted transaxle, which distributed weight more evenly across the chassis. This setup provided incredible traction off the line, allowing the car to launch harder than many of its rivals. To make the Super Duty Tempest even more competitive, Pontiac engineers put it on a diet. Extensive use of aluminum body panels, including the hood, fenders, bumpers, and even the inner structure, helped cut weight significantly. The result was a car that weighed nearly 1,000 pounds less than some of its competition, giving it a major advantage on the strip. Everything about the car was built for speed: heavy-duty suspension components, a high-strength frame, and a stripped-down interior with only the bare essentials for racing. When the Super Duty Tempest hit the track, they immediately showed their potential. The combination of lightweight construction, perfect weight distribution, and massive power made them incredibly quick. In early testing, they were running quarter-mile times in the low 12s, blisteringly fast for 1963, and fast enough to take on the biggest names in drag racing. Some drivers even claimed that with the right setup, the car could break into the 11s, making it one of the quickest factory-built race cars of its time. But just as the Tempest Super Duty was preparing to dominate, General Motors pulled the plug on factory-supported racing. In early 1963, GM executives, concerned about government scrutiny over monopolistic practices and rising safety concerns, ordered all divisions to end their involvement in racing. This decision abruptly halted Pontiac's Super Duty program, leaving the Tempest with no official backing. Without Pontiac's support, most of the 14 Super Duty Tempests built were either scrapped, sold off, or repurposed for other projects. Only a handful survived, and for years they remained little more than a footnote in Pontiac's racing history. Today, the few surviving 1963 Tempest Super Duty cars are considered some of the rarest and most valuable Pontiacs ever built. They represent an era when factory-backed race cars were pushing the limits of performance, and when innovation was at the forefront of American motorsports. Had the GM racing ban not happened, the Super Duty Tempest could have been a dominant force on the drag strip, cementing its place in history alongside legendary muscle cars like the GTO and Firebird. Instead, it remains one of the great what-if stories, an engineering masterpiece that was never given the chance to truly prove itself. The story of the 1983 Chevrolet Corvette C4 twin-turbo is one of those tantalizing what-could-have-been tales in the automotive world, a project that showed immense promise, but was derailed by a confluence of factors that were beyond Chevrolet's control. The Corvette had been America's answer to European sports cars for decades, but by the early 1980s, it had become clear that the C3 generation was no longer competitive. The outdated design, lackluster performance, and general sense of stagnation left Corvette in danger of losing its legendary status. Chevrolet knew it needed to reimagine the Corvette to maintain its reputation, and the C4 was the result. A bold redesign that promised to push the boundaries of American performance. The C4 Corvette, launched in 1980, was an extraordinary departure from the previous generation. Gone was the curvaceous and somewhat clunky bodywork of the C3, replaced by a much more angular, sleek, and aerodynamic shape. It featured an all-new chassis that emphasized handling and weight distribution, something that was far more important than sheer horsepower. The interior was radically different too, with a futuristic digital dashboard that was light years ahead of anything else available at the time. But most importantly, the C4 promised to be a car that could go head-to-head with the best from Europe. However, just as with any great leap forward, Chevrolet knew it had to deliver more than just a new look and modern amenities. The Corvette's most cherished attribute was its performance. And in the early 1980s, the competition from European manufacturers was fierce. Porsche was still dominating with the 911, Ferrari had its 308, and even the British were getting into the mix with the Lotus Esprit. Chevrolet's solution was to make the C4 not just fast, but truly world-class in terms of its power and handling. That's when the idea of a twin-turbocharged Corvette surfaced. The Chevrolet engineers who took on the task of designing a performance-oriented version of the C4 went straight to the heart of American performance, its iconic small-block V8. But this time, they decided to inject some cutting-edge technology into the power plant by adding twin turbos. The turbocharged 5.7-liter V8 could easily surpass 400 horsepower, which would have made the Corvette a legitimate contender against even the most established European supercars. A mid-400 horsepower C4 would have been an instant performance sensation, capable of serious track times and blistering acceleration. Rumors began circulating about the car's capabilities, and the buzz around the twin-turbo Corvette grew. What made this development particularly intriguing was the fact that Chevrolet was considering making the car street legal. This wasn't just a track day special or a limited edition performance package. They had the ambition to create a production vehicle that would be available to enthusiasts who wanted the ultimate performance out of their Corvette. The result would have been a car capable of rivaling the best from Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini, while maintaining the Corvette's American heart and soul. But while the car was being developed, Chevrolet's corporate leadership faced an increasingly difficult situation. By the early 1980s, federal regulations on fuel economy and emissions had become a significant issue for automakers. The growing pressure to meet these standards created an environment where Chevrolet needed to be cautious about releasing any high-performance variants, especially one that would consume large amounts of fuel and generate more emissions. This, coupled with the challenges of turbocharging, especially in an era when it was still a relatively new technology for American automakers, meant that the twin-turbo V8 was facing an uphill battle to be seen as viable for production. The concerns were not just technical, there were also political and financial factors in play. Chevrolet had already invested heavily in the development of the C4, and there was mounting pressure to make sure the car was ready for the market. With so many uncertainties surrounding the performance, emissions, and market viability of a twin-turbo V8 model, it was decided that the risks were too high, and the project was quietly shelved. The Corvette engineers who had worked on the car were left to mourn the loss of a project that could have catapulted the C4 into the ranks of true supercars. To make matters even more complicated, the C4's introduction was already delayed, pushing the model year into 1984. As a result, Chevrolet made the unprecedented decision to completely skip the 1983 model year. This left the 1983 Corvette, along with its promised twin-turbo variant, as a footnote in history, an unfinished promise of what could have been. While the story of the 1983 Corvette has faded from the public eye, it remains a treasured part of Corvette lore. The prototype for the 1983 model, the only remaining car, the 1970 AMC AMX3, stands as one of the most fascinating what-could-have-been stories in automotive history. The AMX3 was AMC's audacious attempt to break into the supercar market, and it was a car that, in terms of design and performance, was light years ahead of its time. It was a car built to take on the European giants, Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche, and challenge them on their own turf. But financial constraints, shifting market conditions, and AMC's own limitations ultimately led to its untimely demise. The story of the AMX3 begins in the late 1960s, when AMC was looking for a way to shake off its reputation as an underdog in the American automotive industry. At the time, AMC was known for producing practical, affordable vehicles for the masses, but company executives were aware that to truly make a mark in the automotive world, they needed to do something bold and groundbreaking. Enter the AMX3, a high-performance, mid-engine supercar designed to compete with the most exclusive European brands. AMC's involvement in the project was unusual, as the company typically focused on more mainstream vehicles. However, they realized that to create a truly competitive supercar, they would need to partner with some of the best names in the automotive world. To bring the AMX3 to life, AMC enlisted the help of Italian automotive legend Giotto Bizzarini, who had been behind some of Ferrari's most famous designs, including the Ferrari 250 GTO. Bizzarini's expertise in designing high-performance race-bred cars brought a level of refinement and technical innovation to the AMX3 that was rare for an American manufacturer at the time. The AMX3 was a mid-engine car, a configuration that was still a novelty in American cars but common in European exotics. This design placed the car's 390 cubic inch V8 engine behind the driver, giving the car better weight distribution, improved handling, and more precise steering. The engine itself was a high-output unit, producing around 340 horsepower, enough to propel the car to top speeds over 100 mph. In a time when most American muscle cars were focused on straight-line speed, the AMX3 stood out for its ability to handle corners with European-like finesse, thanks to its mid-engine layout and low center of gravity. In terms of styling, the AMX3 was pure Italian flair combined with American muscle. The car's design was sleek, aggressive, and unmistakably exotic. With its long hood, low stance, and sharp, angular lines, it was a car that looked like it had come from the future. The sharp contours of the bodywork, the aggressive air intakes, and the wide stance gave the AMX3 an athletic, almost race car-like presence. It was a car that drew attention and admiration wherever it went. However, despite its impressive performance and stunning looks, the AMX3 faced insurmountable obstacles. AMC as a company was simply not in a financial position to bring such a car to production. The development rates of the AMX3 were astronomical, and AMC was already struggling to stay afloat in the competitive American automotive market. While the company had success with vehicles like the AMX Sports Coupe and the Javelin, it didn't have the resources to mass-produce a high-end supercar like the AMX3. With only a small niche market for such an expensive and high-performance vehicle, AMC realized that they would likely not recoup the massive investment required to build the AMX3 at a profit. In total, only 5 prototypes of the AMX3 were built. These prototypes were used for testing and development, with each one slightly differing from the others in terms of design and specification. Some had slight variations in engine tuning, while others were fitted with different interior features. Each car was a hand-built masterpiece, but AMC's financial troubles, combined with a shift in focus towards more practical and profitable vehicles, ultimately led to the cancellation of the AMX3 project. The decision to scrap the AMX3 was a devastating blow to AMC's aspirations of becoming a true contender in the supercar market. While the company had taken a bold step in the right direction with the AMX3, it was clear that the financial realities of the American automotive industry in the early 1970s were too great to overcome. The car was simply too advanced for its time and too expensive for a company that was struggling to remain viable. Today, the 5 surviving AMX3 prototypes are highly coveted by collectors and automotive enthusiasts. These cars are some of the rarest and most exclusive examples of American automotive engineering, and they remain a symbol of what could have been for AMC. The AMX3 represents a lost opportunity for the American automotive industry, a car that, if it had been mass-produced, could have challenged European dominance in the supercar world and perhaps carved out a new niche for American-made exotics. The 1957 Chevrolet Corvette SS represents one of the most intriguing and bittersweet chapters in Corvette history. A story of ambition, innovation, and a sudden end that left enthusiasts and automotive historians wondering what could have been. Chevrolet's Corvette, initially introduced in 1953, had already established itself as America's answer to European sports cars. Yet by the mid-1950s, the Corvette was still far from being the high-performance machine it would later become. In an effort to take the Corvette to the next level and truly challenge European domination on the racetrack, GM began working on a special race version of the Corvette SS, for Stingray Special. It was designed specifically to compete at the prestigious 24 Hours of Le Mans, where Ferrari and other European manufacturers had long reigned supreme. The 1957 Corvette SS was a radical departure from the production Corvettes of the time. GM engineers sought to create an ultra-lightweight, high-performance machine that would be competitive in the grueling endurance race. They outfitted the car with a race-ready chassis and a fuel-injected V8 engine, capable of producing around 283 horsepower, a massive leap forward from the standard Corvette's output. This engine was designed for high-revving performance, ideally suited for racing conditions where endurance and consistency over long hours were as important as raw speed. Beyond the powerful engine, the Corvette SS was built with a focus on weight reduction. The body was made of lightweight materials, including fiberglass, and the chassis was stripped down to the essentials to make the car as agile and responsive as possible on the track. The aim was to create a car that could take on the likes of Ferrari, Maserati, and Jaguar, all of which had made their mark at Le Mans with powerful, well-developed race cars. The Corvette SS made its debut at the 1957 Sebring 12 Hours, where it performed admirably in testing. However, before the car could make its mark at Le Mans, GM executives made a surprising and abrupt decision that would alter the trajectory of the Corvette's racing aspirations. Amidst rising pressure from various stakeholders, including GM's board members and marketing divisions, the company decided to halt all factory-sponsored racing efforts, including the Corvette SS project. The official reason for this decision was to focus on GM's broader business goals, especially in light of the growing public concerns about the perceived dangers of racing and its association with high-performance cars. GM's top executives believed that factory involvement in racing could lead to negative publicity and harm the company's family-friendly image. This decision was further influenced by the increasing emphasis on consumer safety and the burgeoning anti-racing sentiment that was gaining traction in the late 1950s. The termination of the Corvette SS project was a crushing blow to the team that had poured their hearts into developing the car. Despite its promising performance and the potential to give European manufacturers a serious run for their money, the car was relegated to the history books before it could race in a major event like Le Mans. In the end, the Corvette SS never had the chance to prove itself in competition, and it was swiftly retired, with much of the project and its future potential left unfulfilled. Only a handful of Corvette SS prototypes were built, and most were kept by GM for testing and development purposes. These cars were unlike anything that had come before them in the world of American sports cars. Sleek, aggressive, and engineered with the singular goal of winning at the highest level of motorsport. While the cars that were produced were never raced, they left an indelible mark on the Corvette brand. The decision to cancel the Corvette SS remains one of the great what-ifs in automotive history. Had it been allowed to compete at Le Mans, it might have altered the trajectory of Corvette's legacy in the world of racing, possibly giving GM the competitive edge it needed to make a serious impact on the global stage. Instead, the Corvette SS remained a prototype, an unrealized promise, a symbol of what could have been. Today, the 1957 Corvette SS is considered one of the most iconic and valuable prototypes in Corvette history. Its status as an untapped racing legend only adds to its allure among collectors and enthusiasts. While the Corvette would go on to become one of the most successful and beloved American sports cars, the SS project serves as a reminder of a pivotal moment in the brand's history. A moment when Chevrolet had the opportunity to compete with the best in the world, but chose to take a different path. The Corvette SS remains a testament to the ambition, vision, and ultimately the missed opportunity of an American racing icon. The 1974 Pontiac GTO W72 455 Super Duty stands as one of the greatest what-ifs in muscle car history, a car that on paper had all the potential to be the ultimate American muscle machine, but was tragically canceled just before it could reach production. This would have been Pontiac's last great muscle car, a fitting end to the GTO's legendary run, but instead it was crushed under the weight of federal emissions regulations and skyrocketing insurance rates. In the early 70s, muscle cars were beginning to feel the heat. The muscle car era, which had seen a golden age of raw power and high-performance machines, was slowly being throttled by rising insurance premiums, stricter government regulations, and increasing public concern over pollution and safety. By 1974, Pontiac was facing a tough battle to meet these new regulations and still keep the spirit of the GTO alive. But they had one final ace up their sleeve, a last-ditch attempt to unleash the most powerful GTO ever built, the 455 Super Duty. At the heart of the 1974 GTO W72 Super Duty was the legendary 455 cubic inch V8, the same engine that had powered some of Pontiac's greatest muscle cars of the late 60s and early 70s. However, the W72 version was going to be something special. It was a performance-enhanced version of the standard 455, with a forged steel crankshaft, high-flow aluminum heads, and a special camshaft that gave the engine significantly more horsepower than the standard offerings. This engine was expected to produce a staggering 455 horsepower, putting it in the same league as some of the most powerful muscle cars of the era, such as the 454 Chevy and the Hemi-powered Mopars. But what really set the W72 455 Super Duty apart from its contemporaries was its intended packaging. Pontiac's engineers had designed a car that could put all that power to the pavement effectively, with the right suspension, handling, and braking systems to keep the car planted during high-speed runs. This was going to be a muscle car that could not only launch off the line, but handle corners and provide an exhilarating driving experience on the road, not just the strip. The GTO's iconic wide stance, muscular proportions, and aggressive front end were poised to be the perfect match for the engine's power. However, just as it looked like Pontiac was ready to pull the trigger on the W72 455 Super Duty, the landscape of the muscle car world began to shift dramatically. New federal emissions regulations were introduced, which required automakers to drastically reduce the amount of pollutants their vehicles could emit. This was the beginning of the end for many of the high-performance cars of the era, as manufacturers struggled to meet the new standards without drastically reducing their engine outputs. On top of that, insurance rates for muscle cars were skyrocketing, and the car-buying public was increasingly turning away from big gas-guzzling engines in favor of more economical and practical vehicles. Pontiac, caught between the pressures of government regulations, insurance costs, and a shifting market, made the decision to pull the plug on the 455 Super Duty GTO just before it could reach production. While the car never made it to dealerships, the legend of the 1974 Pontiac GTO W72 455 Super Duty continues to live on. There are a few surviving prototypes and pre-production models that are occasionally shown at car shows, but the full production run that could have cemented the GTO's status as the ultimate muscle car never came to be. This missed opportunity left enthusiasts lamenting what could have been one last big block muscle car from Pontiac that would have taken the GTO nameplate to its apex, and perhaps even defined the last true hurrah for the muscle car era before the world shifted toward more fuel-efficient, less aggressive performance vehicles. If the 1974 Pontiac GTO W72 455 Super Duty had been built, it would have been a game-changer. It could have outperformed many of its competitors, offering a balance of power and handling that would have been unmatched in the muscle car scene. It might have been the final statement in Pontiac's legacy as a performance brand, and perhaps even served as the ultimate muscle car to send off the GTO into the annals of automotive history. Ultimately, though, it was canceled before it could even hit the production line, making the 1974 GTO W72 455 Super Duty one of the greatest lost opportunities in automotive history. As the years go by, this legend grows in stature, a symbol of what might have been if the stars had aligned just a little bit differently. And much like many other muscle cars of the era, it remains a part of the rich tapestry of American performance vehicles that were both revolutionary and fleeting. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona 503 stands as one of the most iconic and controversial muscle cars ever created. A car so radical, so ahead of its time, that it sparked a revolution on the racetrack, only to be halted by a combination of governmental regulations and the governing body of NASCAR. The Charger Daytona was Dodge's audacious attempt to dominate both the streets and the racetrack, with a vehicle that was both a technological marvel and a testament to the power of aerodynamic design. At the heart of the Charger Daytona was the very essence of American muscle: raw horsepower, aggressive styling, and the promise of speed. But Dodge didn't just want to build another fast car. They wanted to build a car that would crush the competition on the NASCAR circuit. To do that, they created a car with a distinctive design that was unlike anything the public had seen before. The Daytona featured a massive wedge-shaped nose cone and a gigantic rear wing, both of which were specifically designed to give the car the downforce needed to maintain stability at high speeds, especially on the superspeedways where NASCAR races were often held. The car was powered by a range of high-performance engines, including the famous 426 Hemi V8, which pushed out 425 horsepower, though many say it produced much more in racing trim. With its aerodynamic features and immense power, the Daytona was a force to be reckoned with on the track. The Charger Daytona's dominance in NASCAR was undeniable. In 1990, it won its first race at the Talladega, and by the end of the season, it had secured a place in history with several more victories. This car was designed with one goal in mind: to break the 200 mph barrier on the track, and it was successful in achieving that goal. The Daytona was not just fast, it was faster than anything NASCAR had ever seen before. The performance and success of the Daytona were so remarkable that it quickly became the face of Dodge's racing program. However, the very attributes that made the Daytona so successful also made it a target for change. Its extreme aerodynamic modifications, such as the giant rear wing and nose cone, were so effective that they tipped the balance of competition in Dodge's favor. NASCAR, concerned that the extreme design would give Dodge an unfair advantage, took a bold step. In 1971, they instituted a rule banning any car with a nose cone and rear wing combination. Essentially, they killed the Daytona's competitive edge, forcing Dodge to abandon production of the car just after its first year on the track. But it wasn't just NASCAR that had a problem with the Daytona's extreme design. The car's futuristic and outlandish appearance was a significant departure from the traditional, conservative designs of the era, making it a difficult sell to the average consumer. Dodge built only 503 street versions of the Daytona, a number that was limited in part by the new regulations and in part by the public's hesitancy to embrace a car that looked more like something out of a science fiction movie than a traditional muscle car. Despite its limited production, the 1969 Charger Daytona quickly became a collector's item. Its combination of raw performance, radical design, and NASCAR heritage made it one of the most coveted muscle cars of all time. However, the combination of NASCAR's ban and the public's reluctance to embrace its avant-garde styling meant that the car never achieved the recognition it deserved during its short production run. In fact, Dodge never fully capitalized on the Daytona's potential, and it quickly faded from the spotlight. Today, the Charger Daytona 503 remains one of the most enigmatic and sought-after muscle cars in history. It stands as a symbol of what could have been, a car that could have redefined both NASCAR and street performance had it been allowed to flourish. Unfortunately, the combination of regulation and public perception conspired to end the Daytona's production before it could achieve its full potential. Its story is a reminder of the times when the government and racing regulations could shape the fate of some of the most powerful cars ever built, curtailing innovation and stopping a potential legend in its tracks. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona 503 is remembered as one of the most radical and tragically short-lived muscle cars in history. A car that was too fast, too advanced, and too ahead of its time to survive in the world that came after it. The 1990 Ford Mustang SSP Interceptor was a rare and intriguing chapter in the Mustang's storied history, as it marked the attempt to create a performance vehicle specifically designed for law enforcement. By taking the beloved Ford Mustang and turning it into a high-performance police car, Ford ventured into uncharted territory, fusing American muscle with law enforcement practicality. However, despite the immense power and potential of the Mustang SSP, it faced a host of challenges that led to its eventual discontinuation and relegation to automotive obscurity. The Mustang SSP was part of a broader program Ford had started in the late 1980s to offer specialized vehicles for police forces across the country. As part of this program, Ford developed the Special Service Package, SSP, a performance-focused version of the Mustang that came equipped with a larger engine and an assortment of police-specific features. The result was a car that could accelerate from 0 to 60 mph in under 7 seconds and outrun most of the vehicles it would encounter on the road. This was a muscle car disguised as a police vehicle, a rare combination in the world of law enforcement vehicles. At the heart of the Mustang SSP was a 5.8L V8 engine that made more than 200 horsepower, a significant upgrade over the standard Mustang of the era. This engine, paired with a 4-speed automatic transmission, gave the SSP the kind of performance that made it ideal for high-speed chases and quick getaways. With a top speed approaching 140 mph, it was far faster than most civilian cars at the time, and it had the ability to catch up with suspects in high-speed pursuits, something police officers would value immensely in the right situations. However, this speed came with a catch. While the Mustang SSP was built for high-speed performance, it was in many ways too fast for its own good. The performance capabilities of the car, while impressive, presented certain challenges when it came to handling and safety. In pursuit scenarios, police officers are often required to maintain control of their vehicles at high speeds in unpredictable conditions, something that can be more difficult with a car as powerful and fast as the Mustang SSP. The car's sheer speed made it harder to handle, especially for officers who were used to driving vehicles that weren't built for racing. The concerns about handling led many police departments to reconsider the Mustang SSP for everyday police duties. The liability issues didn't stop there. The Mustang SSP was equipped with police-grade modifications such as reinforced suspension, heavy-duty brakes, and other specialized equipment like sirens, spotlights, and communication systems. While these additions made the car more capable for law enforcement use, they also contributed to the car's unique and expensive upkeep. The Mustang SSP was not a typical police vehicle. It was a muscle car with all the high-performance features of a racing car, designed to go fast but not necessarily built for constant, daily use in the demanding environment of law enforcement. The strain of regular police use, especially at the speeds the car was capable of, was seen as a potential hazard for both the officers and the car itself. As a result of these concerns, only a small number of Mustang SSPs were built, and they were used primarily for specialized law enforcement tasks, such as high-speed pursuits or certain tactical situations. Many of these cars were deployed in select areas where there was a need for high-performance vehicles. But as the reality of the Mustang SSP's limitations became clear, the program was quietly phased out. The decision to cancel the project was largely driven by practical considerations, as the car's extreme speed became a liability rather than an asset for police departments. Furthermore, as the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the regulatory landscape for vehicles, particularly emissions laws and fuel efficiency standards, began to tighten, making the Mustang SSP's large V8 engine and high performance less appealing in comparison to more practical, economical options. Despite its short-lived production run and limited use, the Mustang SSP is today a sought-after collector's item, appreciated for its unique place in automotive history. Fewer than 1,000 of these vehicles were built, and they were mostly sold to specialized police departments that valued their performance. Over the years, only a handful of Mustang SSPs have survived in good condition, making them incredibly rare and valuable to collectors of both law enforcement and Mustang enthusiasts. The Mustang SSP serves as an example of how a car designed for high performance and speed can sometimes be too much of a good thing. In a world where police vehicles are required to be practical, durable, and capable of handling high-stress situations, the Mustang SSP's performance was both an asset and a hindrance. The 2003 Mercury Marauder supercharged concept was an intriguing chapter in Ford's pursuit of creating a modern muscle sedan, a car that could combine the practicality of 4 doors with the power and performance of a classic muscle car. The Marauder, originally a nameplate that harkened back to the 1960s, was revived as a performance model in the early 2000s, aiming to appeal to enthusiasts looking for something more practical than a Mustang, but still offering a potent V8 engine in the muscle car spirit. While the original Mercury Marauder, introduced in 2003, was already an impressive package, equipped with a 4.6L DOHC V8 engine producing 302 horsepower, Ford had much grander plans. The real excitement came when the concept for a supercharged version of the Marauder surfaced. This version would have used a 5.4L supercharged V8 borrowed from the Ford Lightning truck, which could produce over 400 horsepower, putting it right in line with the muscle sedans of the time, like the Dodge Charger and Chrysler 300C, but with a distinctive Mercury flair. The concept for the supercharged Marauder was not just about raw power, it was also about performance. The idea was to deliver a factory-built muscle car with 4 doors, a car that could stand toe-to-toe with the best performance sedans in the market. The Marauder would have had a full-size sedan layout, making it a more practical option for those who wanted both performance and space. An American muscle sedan that could haul a family and still be fun to drive. With more than 400 horsepower, the Marauder supercharged concept would have been an absolute beast, capable of reaching impressive 0-60 mph times and leaving many of its competitors in the dust. The Marauder would have also featured a sport-tuned suspension, enhanced brakes, and performance upgrades designed to handle its power, making it a true muscle car that didn't compromise on driving dynamics. The idea of a muscle sedan with such potent performance and the classic American muscle car aesthetics, combined with 4 doors for practical use, was a tantalizing one for fans of both performance cars and family-friendly vehicles. However, Ford's decision to scrap the project just before production was a major disappointment for enthusiasts. Despite positive initial responses to the concept, Ford ultimately decided not to move forward with the supercharged Marauder. A combination of factors led to its cancellation. Rising production costs, changing market dynamics, and Ford's internal shift in priorities toward other projects. The car was also facing competition from both established and emerging performance sedans from other manufacturers, and the decision was made to focus resources elsewhere. As a result, the supercharged Marauder never saw the light of day, and the regular 2003 Marauder, while still a solid muscle sedan, was eventually discontinued after a relatively short production run, leaving the performance-focused version a dream that never materialized. Fans of the concept, however, could only imagine what might have been. A 4-door muscle car that could easily rival the top sedans of its time, offering power, style, and practicality in a single package. Today, the 2003 Mercury Marauder supercharged concept is remembered as one of those what-could-have-been moments in automotive history. It represented a time when American manufacturers were still pushing the envelope in terms of performance and innovation, trying to combine the muscle car heritage with the more practical needs of everyday drivers. The fact that the project was canceled before it could reach the public means that the supercharged Marauder remains one of the most fascinating might-have-beens in modern American automotive history, a symbol of Ford's bold ambition, and a reminder of what could have been the ultimate factory muscle sedan. For fans of American muscle and performance sedans, the canceled 2003 Mercury Marauder supercharged concept remains a source of both nostalgia and regret. It was a car that embodied the best aspects of classic muscle cars, but with a modern twist, and it's easy to imagine how it could have dominated the performance sedan market. Instead, it was consigned to the realm of automotive dreams, forever a what-if in the minds of those who knew what it could have been.